What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS core plays for this week's Mexico Open. Gonna break down the top end of that Draftkings pricing board and give you 4 players that I have my eye on for those GPP contests that you might want to consider getting some ownership leverage to. Whether they're a sneaky play, the modeling loves them, or they're just a piece of chalk that I can't avoid, these 4 players are going to be foundational pieces of my personal player pool and guys that I'm actively looking to get well over the field on. So with that being said, a lot to go through. Let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. As we typically do with these breakdowns, let's first take a look at our key stats for some of the metrics that I'm using to identify my top plays. And if you saw my course breakdown video, which of course is in the description of this video as well, this is all about distance, all about long irons, and then just going out there, taking advantage of the par 5s. So par 71 setup, nearly 7,500 yards. So players are going to be challenged both off the tee and into greens when it comes to the distance factor. And taking advantage of the par 5s is how you really separate yourself from the field. So winning score was right around 17 under par last year with Jon Rahm. I'd expect to see something similar this time around. The weather conditions look relatively benign with wind gusts close to 18, sometimes 20 miles an hour, but really that's as worse as it's going to get. So I'm looking at birdie or better percentage, sand saves, there's over 100 sand bunkers in property. Looking at Norman designs, it's a Greg Norman design over there for the Vidanta Vallarta Norman course, as you could probably have guessed. Looking at tropical golf, which is any event really in this part of the world that includes Mexico, all of the island events that we have, Bermuda, Corrales Punta Cana, Puerto Rico Open, that sort of thing. And then our comp courses, which include El Camaleon, Corrales, the home of the Corrales Punta Cana. We have Cocoa Beach, the Puerto Rico Open course, and then Kiawah Island Golf Club, the home of the 2021 PGA Championship, as a little bit of an extra boost there. So with that being said, let's talk about the elephant in the room, both from an ownership and from just a pure talent level perspective. The best player in the field is Jon Rahm, arguably the hottest player in the world at this point. And yes, I'll be playing him in my lineups, but I didn't think you needed a 5-minute explanation on why to play first off the guy that won here last year, and second off the world #1. So Jon Rahm, just because he's not on my core plays does not mean that I'm avoiding him in DFS this week. It's just going to come down to how much, right? Ownership is going to be a huge factor in that decision. If he's in the 40 to maybe 45% range, then he's probably somebody I'm not locking, right? I'm probably going to right around match the field on that sort of player and actively look to win the GPP or really get my leverage in that GPP with the rest of those lineups. But the player that I want to focus on up here in the expensive tier is going to be Tony Finau at $10,700. And what I like here is the past palm familiarity. His first ever tour win way back in the day was at the Puerto Rico Open. Cocoa Beach is another relatively long past palm track where you're really going to be tested both off the tee and into greens in terms of that factor. So Tony Finau has won any similar kind of course, ended up finishing in the top 5 last year, had a Sunday surge that nearly brought him into a playoff with Jon Rahm. Of late, maybe not playing his best golf, but if we zoom out a little bit, you look at the good old Tony Finau, right? Gaining a bunch on approach, gaining off the tee, and that putter has become a positive for him over the last 6 months or so. Is why he's elevated his game to the next level. It's why he's a borderline 10K option regardless of field strength. So at $10,700, he's somebody that's really catching my eye. Again, last year, tied for second, was just one shot off that playoff. The recent form might keep his ownership a little bit lower than it should be, right? I mean, his best finish was a T19 at the Players. But T26, T31 at the RBC Heritage, it's not like he's playing poorly. He's close, but just not really piecing it all together for 4 rounds at a time. If he can get out early, spike for a 5-6 under par round, put himself into contention, I think that's exactly what a Tony Finau needs to ride that momentum throughout the weekend and perhaps get to the optimal lineup for DFS. So whether it's with a Jon Rahm, whether it's starting a lineup with the Tony Finau, pretty much every single lineup that I'm playing this week is going to have at least one of these top 2 options, if not both of them together in a lineup. And if you were to play them both, you're left to 6,800 50 remaining per player, which is hard to deal with, but it's not impossible with a field of this strength. The talent level drops off rather quickly, whether it's from those top 2 players down to a Wyndham Clark. But when you start to get even into some of the middle to top end of the 7K range options, you start to fall off quickly. And there's just guys that you have no business wanting to play in these GPP lineups. So just mixing and matching down there might be the way to go, right? There's not much of a difference between the guys priced at $6,500 and then some of the guys at 72, even $7,300. So I think that playing these top 2 guys is a little bit more viable in this sort of field than it would be in a major championship where you're going to want to jam in as many of those 7, especially top of the 7K options as you can, or those 8K consistent studs that especially last week won a bunch of people GPPs. So with that being said, Tony Finau, 10,700. If you start a lineup with him, you can take whoever the heck you want, right? These 8K options come back into play. Even if you just started a lineup with Jon Rahm, right, you could still play 1 or 2 of these guys in the 8K range. It's just specifically the lineups where you're taking them together, you're probably going to have to skip that part of the pricing board. Next up, we've got Patrick Rodgers, and I'm really hoping the ownership stays low here. So this play is dependent on ownership. It's probably the only one of the 4 core plays that I might talk myself off of come Wednesday. But at this point, I'm expecting something in the 10, maybe 15% range at the very most when it comes to his ownership. And if that truly is the case, which again, it's super early, it could change a whole lot throughout the week when it comes to the expectation here, I'll be on him because on paspalum grass has been by far his best surface and is actually a relatively large sample size at this point where he's played over 9 events on paspalum and is gaining over a stroke per round of the greens, but of late has also been striping it. You take a look at the last 36 rounds, you can see he's just elevated himself to another level where he's gaining in all 4 stat categories. Before, you really saw him gaining around the green and with the putter, and from time to time he would spike off the tee because Patrick Rodgers is a relatively long player, but the approach play, though it's only right around a neutral right now, that is a huge improvement over what we're used to seeing. And the one huge green spot for him with approach, and this has been for his whole career, not really just of late, has been the long irons. He's been an exceptional par 5 scorer, somebody who with those 3-4 irons regularly hits greens regulation. And of course, that's not to be expected, particularly when it's a 250-yard plus approach shot. But for whatever reason, the further you get away from the hole, the better Patrick Rodgers is compared to your average tour player. So $9,300, you like the last 36 round form, but if you look at the last 12 rounds, you'll really start to like to see what you have here. Gaining over half a stroke per round in all 3 tee to green categories. And the putter has actually been a little bit lagging behind, right? Only gaining 0.1 strokes per round. So I see a ton of room for improvement. I see a player that loves paspalum who what did he finish here last year? 10th place, right? Didn't have anything crazy going on here last year, but still sneaky top 10 finish. Definitely has that kind of upside, if not better, here in 2023. So hopefully the ownership stays low. If it's 15% or less, I'm definitely going to be a buyer at $9,300. And just a reminder, before we hop into the last 2 picks here, if you want access to all of my modeling projections, player pool, ownership projections throughout the week, check out my Patreon page. There's a link down below to that. It's $10 a month. Gets you access to all of these. You can download them, use them for all of your modeling, all of your projections on your optimizers, and of course gets you access to all of my prop stuff, whether it's prize picks write-ups, whether it's slips for underdog, all that sort of fun stuff, all under the same tier, so check that out. But next up, we've got Ben Martin, $8,600, and he's another player that I think ownership might be there on, so I'm hoping it stays sub 15%, but what I like here is the mold that he's been putting out. This guy is a ball striking phenom. He's very consistent, right? He's been around for a long time, right? He won the Zurich Classic, God knows how long ago, 5+ years ago at this point. He obviously lost his tour card, has come back with a vengeance here for this season. Right around a neutral off the tee, but gaining 0.6 strokes per round on approach. It's right around a neutral with the 2 short game categories combined. That's very much so on brand for him. He's not a great short game player. You look at the last 12 rounds, the ball striking has been there even more. Gaining over half a stroke per round off the tee, gaining close to a stroke per round with the approach play, and very much so on brand, right around a neutral with both of the short game categories. And at this kind of track with a weaker field, on a surface that for his career has been his best surface, he's gaining close to half a stroke per round on these paspalum greens. I really like the upside here. So kind of like a Patrick Rodgers, we're going to have to keep an eye on the ownership, make sure that he's not getting there right around 20% because, if he was going to be twice as owned as everyone around him, same thing with Patrick Rodgers, maybe in large field GPPs, you've got to consider that, right? Like playing both of those guys together might not be the best idea, right? Especially if you're taking down a 50 to 100,000 entry sort of contest. But in single entries, that kind of thing, that's why I identify these guys as core plays. I don't really know if I care about it all that much. When you're only playing against 200 to maybe 1,000 entries in some of the larger single entry contests, duplicating isn't going to happen very often, and getting leverage is a lot easier to do down low than it is in some of the large field GPPs. So I just wanted to identify that, let you guys know that about these core plays, is a lot of times they get some ownership because they're some of the best plays on the slate, right? And there's a good reason that they go out there and play well a lot of times. Next up, we've got Stephan Jaeger, $8,200. Number 8 in terms of total model ranking. It gets it done both from the long-term and the short-term perspective. And if you really zoom out on Stephan Jaeger, you start to see why I like him so much. From tee to green is a consistent gainer, gains about a third of a stroke off the tee, one of the longer players in this field. Gains around the green in that approach play, though it can be a little bit inconsistent, still slightly gaining there. And the putter, believe it or not, has been a negative over that time frame. And though Stephan Jaeger can be a little bit of an inconsistent putter, when this guy run hots, watch out. I mean, that's why this guy has been first round leader, or at least in contention to be first round leader at least 4 or 5 times this year. Last year was lighting it up on the greens. And when we get him on Paspalum, for whatever reason, he's loved it, right? He's gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke per round on the Paspalum surface. So I like the upside there. I like the length off the tee, right? That was one of my number 1 key stats we were looking at. And kind of similar to Patrick Rodgers, the further away from the hole that you get Jaeger, the better he is on approach compared to your PGA Tour average. So he's the kind of guy that I'm identifying here. The putting stats are just the icing on the cake with all 4 of these plays here. And I meant to mention that with Tony Finau, he is losing on the surface, though he only has 2 events with actual shots gained metrics on Paspalum. That doesn't include the win that he's had. It doesn't include a lot of the top finishes that he had. In fact, last year was one of the 2 events that he had the shots gained category for. The other one was the 2021 PGA Championship that he played extremely poorly in. And last year, he finished tied for second, losing 2 strokes putting to the field. So, we don't have the shots gained from way back in the day, but you'd hope that he went out there and gained when he won there at the Puerto Rico Open. And if he even, putted to an average last year, right, got rid of those 2 strokes putting that he lost, he wins the golf tournament. So worth noting that all 4 of these players seem to have that advantage, which, again, is just the icing on the cake when it comes to these GPP plays. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the core plays breakdown. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead, let me know who you think is going to win this golf tournament. Also, go ahead and let me know a little reason why. For me, I'm going to try and be a little bit more creative. No John Rahm, not going to go with the Tony Finau. How about we take Ben Martin? Ben Martin hasn't been in the winner's circle for quite some time. Did finish as a runner-up last year at Corrales Putacana, which is one of my top comp courses and is coming in with the best form of his life. So I'll be a little bit more creative about it. We'll go Ben Martin, but go ahead, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I appreciate all the support. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content throughout the week. We'll have value plays dropping tomorrow, our weekly live stream, which will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, where you can bring on any questions that you have. We'll go through the weather, any DFS chalk that we have to consider when building our lineups, and overall, just go over everything that you need, whether it's for betting or for DFS, and make sure we're ready, it locked and loaded, ready to go there for the weekend. So looking forward to it, guys. Should be a fun weekend. A few superstars teamed it up, but one for the hardcore golf fans, right? Kind of like last week at the Zurich. I personally ended up cashing out really well on that side. Didn't watch much of it, but hey, from the ROI perspective, it was a really good week. And also on the prop side, smashed there too. So hopefully, one where if we do our due diligence, do our research, we can go out there and take advantage of. So best of luck out there, and I'll catch you guys on Wednesday for the DFS live stream.